welcome back to another episode of Inventory Insights. I am your host, Andre Juster. Today, we have a special guest again. We have Henrico Swanepoel back. Please, welcome back. How are you doing?
Good, thank you, Andre. Thanks for having me back. It's always a privilege.
Glad to have you back. It's good summer day here, and we are hoping to understand the synergizing effect for implementation when it comes to spare parts management. So we're going to look at the integration within the larger subset of asset management. Where does spare parts management sit?
Sure, Andre. So of course, when you say asset management, it's physical asset management, so not the financial side. Spares don't fit there necessarily. But on the physical asset management side, it's all got to do with owning or being responsible for assets. And ISO 55000 tells us an asset is any and everything that contributes value to your organization. Right. Spare parts, of course, being a facet of asset management, or MRO, it often being called. And I always tell engineers, you can have the best planning, the best asset care plans, the best software, EAMS, CMMS system to support you. If on the day you have a failure and a asset is down and you're ready to fix it, artisans there, and suddenly no spare, you still have a big problem. Yeah. So, basically, I think spare parts management is critical within the bigger asset management landscape.
Good. I think that's a good summation. Now, regarding strategic alignment and the big companies, where do you think this fits in to align strategically within that space?
So again, Andre, when it comes to the financial aspects of spare parts management typically, in the majority of organizations, it's not a given, however, falls under the supply chain function. And often that function reports into the CFO or financial director. But what we do know and what we do see is that maintenance is responsible, of course, or engineering is responsible for the maintenance budget, for the uptime budget. So the spare is considered an asset in an organization up to the point of usage where it suddenly becomes an expense. And in a tough economic world today, there's a continuous pressure for companies to have high uptime but low maintenance cost or downtime costs.
No, that was a good point you touched on. Whether having it or not having it, there are some downsides. So it's good to have it, just in time, for instance. A lot of that needs to be, the delivery has to come on just when you want it so that you can use it and it doesn't stay stagnant in the stores.
Of course.
Good point. So now curious about the risk mitigation. How is that a factor we need to play in when we have financial budgetary constraints?
Yeah, so when you talk asset management, the logical risks that come to mind is performance versus cost. And when the term performance is used, it's an overall performance of the plant. Spare parts management is somewhat similar. Of course, the cost component is there, the working capital component, but the performance portion is the availability side of it. And when you ask engineers what is the availability risk they see or feel, they jump to asset criticality. And there's a bit of a misperception again that asset criticality directly correlates to spare criticality. Yes, there's a very strong correlation, but it is not necessarily direct. And reality is that you might, from a spares perspective, experience some commonality of spares across assets. So although a specific asset in a certain process might be critical, the spares it contains might be common to other assets, making the criticality on the spare level a bit different. The other concern I always have when we talk criticality is that it's very engineering focused, very much from an asset perspective. But there are, however, other factors or angles to consider. One logic one, of course, being the supply criticality. Right. One, engineers don't necessarily want to know, or was just simply not aware of. Extensive lead times, availability of suppliers, redundancy in suppliers, so having an alternative supplier, are all risks that should be considered when you talk risk mitigation in the bigger asset management landscape.
And as we know, these are big questions. These are expensive questions. Now, how can we ensure that we can have data-driven decision-making, specifically with cost-effective needs?
I said it before, but it's having the right spare at the right time. Now, how do you know what is the right spare? How do you know what is the right time? So you do need data to make the decision, and data-driven decision-making is probably the buzzword, or has been the buzzword for the last number of years. The push is, of course, to not make lagging decisions, but leading decisions, so reactive decisions. And that is where the trick comes with spare parts management. You do not want to stock for something that you could have ordered in time. You want to reduce your holding cost by only ordering when you actually need it. But you need to understand then what is, they talk about tactical or planned maintenance versus unplanned or non-tactical maintenance. And if you can differentiate between the two, typically your tactical planned portion is rather stable, allowing you to reduce stock while maintaining availability through proper planning. And then you still have the volatile portion, the unplanned breakdowns that just happens. But if you can isolate their probability, if you can isolate the quantities in which they happen, and you have the data to make the decision, it typically leads to being able to reduce overall stock while still maintaining a certain risk mitigation level or safety stock level for those unexpected occurrences.
Right. Great. I would like to touch upon the fact where we're going about costs, talking about time spent, workload of the operational team, but as well availability. You're having to react quickly in high uptime, high productivity situations. Can you maybe recap on those three all working together to get that good balancing act?
Yeah, you can consider production your end client, I would say. And it's a very emotional playing field. Production blames engineering. Engineering likes to blame the storeman. The storeman blames his supply chain. It's an emotional field. The reality is that the synergy is only really created when there's trust. And why do I say trust? Well, you expect supply chain to deliver on availability, a feeling of safeness that sits with the engineers. And the engineers, a good mechanical engineer always wants his whole plant also in his stores. So to comfort his conscience or his feeling, his anxiety when it comes to the risks of downtime, he really needs to trust supply chain. Of course, supply chain needs to deliver to that trust. But it also means supply chain can only really reduce costs if they are the central point of managing the landscape. You can think of it in your own personal capacity. You have buying power when you have a lot to buy and you can negotiate with suppliers. That's when the financial benefit is on your side. And the same goes with supply chain. So if engineering, in Afrikaans we say boer maak 'n plan, but if engineering makes their own plans and the management of spares does not sit with a single point of contact, you lose that capability.
Brilliant recap. Very, very useful. Now, lastly, on, let's say, the larger aspect, we're talking about the different departments having to work together. Now, in a cost-effective situation, how is it best to use continuous improvement to drive spare parts management?
Andre, so it's a bit of a loaded question. The first thing I think you need to understand is that in today's world, when we talk assets, it is mechanical assets, it's electronic assets. And as with anything, and you can think of your bicycle, your car, maybe a printer, when it's new, it performs perfect. The moment it starts aging, you often see a decline in performance. But you also see that the harder you work the asset, the quicker the decline, the quicker the deterioration of the performance. And that's, of course, the same with any asset in the industry. The difference is just some gives you a warning, and there are things like condition monitoring, etc., to pick up the decline. Some don't. But the effect on spares is that it means your demand profile is volatile. It's never stable. If depending on the asset itself, depending on whether the asset has been replaced, depending at the rate at which production happens, your demand profile for spares is influenced. So a periodic practice of continuously evaluating the demand profile versus what you actually supply is critical if you want to keep the optimal level of spares.
Brilliant. Insightful as always, and that's what we specialize in, is to find that balancing point. And we're hoping to do that for our clients, as always. And that is all we have the time for today. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Andre Jooste. This has been Henrico Swanepoel. Thanks again. We are always happy to have you. We're keen to have you on for another time as well. Any final words?
Can't wait, Andre. Thank you very much. And we're at the beginning of 2024. So all the best for everyone. And if there's anyone that's looking for improvement initiatives, especially around spare parts management, please feel free to contact us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Henrico. That has been Inventory Insights by Gordian Logistic Experts. We're happy to have you. Please share, and we hope to have a good day. Enjoy. Cheers.